It's always interesting to listen to your introduction. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you for having me. Okay, so We Must is an amazing book written by our Puja Gurudev. And, Gurudev definitely had created this sense of urgency of making our lives meaningful. And I think We Must really encapsulates that more than any other text. Like if you read the Gita and things like that, of course Gurudev is saying, get your act together and, realize. But in We Must, it's almost like today. We have to realize today, and we have to improve today, and we have to get our sadhana in check today. And so it really helps to get rid of the tamas. And so just before the meeting also I checked in. We Must has he's written it more in the style of each chapter standing alone. So it does have a bit of repetition through it. And so the first chapter speaks about listening and about seva, about karma yoga. And I know seva and karma yoga comes quite a bit in the theme of We Must. So I'm going to focus on the first bit about listening, which also I'm sure you've heard. So there's this great Zen poem that I had heard, where a student goes to Guru, Zen master, and says, I'd like to reach enlightenment, and could you please help me? And Zen master says, well, I can't really do anything. I can just point out the path. And so for today, what we're going to do is go into the forest and listen and come back and tell me what you hear. The student comes back and student says, I heard the wind rustling through the leaves. I heard the call of birds. I heard, the movement of the long grass. And Guru shakes head and says, no, that won't do. Comes back to the Guru and he says, this time I could hear the ants crawling and I could hear the eggs hatching. And then, people like us will hear that and think, wow. And so Guru still shakes his head and says, no, that's still not what you need to be hearing. So he goes back into the forest, sits very, very attentively and listens, comes back and says, I could hear the dewdrop moving and I could hear the caterpillar breathing. And Guru still shakes his head and says, no. And so finally he asks, what am I supposed to be listening to? And the answer is to the listener. So even in this chapter of We Must, Gurudev has written that listening is about listening outside, definitely. But listening is also about listening to our own minds and our own thoughts. And so there's this beautiful, very easy chart that is given in psychology, which gets quoted often, about how we can know ourselves. And so we know that in spirituality, this is one of the primary things, to know ourselves. And so roughly speaking, a quarter of our personality we know and the whole world knows. Then there's a quarter of our personality which we know, but we hide it very well from the world, or we try to hide it from most of the world. Then there's a quarter of our personality which we are blind to, we don't know, or we refuse to acknowledge, and the rest of the world seems to know it quite clearly. And the last quarter is not known to us and not known to the world. And so as spiritual seekers, when we work walking on this path and the idea of know ourselves, then, so there's half we already know. We know what we know, and we know what's shared knowledge with the whole public. So the bit that other people know, that we either can't see, we blind to, or we in denial about, is where listening comes really important with listening to other people. So there's this beautiful quote about listening, which we're familiar. Listening is it's more than just hearing. Hearing is when sound hits our ears, but listening is when we're listening with our eyes, because so much is communicated not verbally, right? Our posture, our expressions, or even hesitation before we talk, that communicates so much. So even if you ask me a simple question of, are you hungry? And then I'm like, yes, but it says, so the silence says more than even the answer to the question. So we're listening with our eyes, even not just our ears. And then we're listening with our hearts. So listening doesn't happen just here in the brain with the, I need to understand and I need to know what factually is going on and I need to analyze and I need to judge and I need to assimilate and I need to respond. But listening with the heart is a very deeper sense of listening, in the sense that we're listening with the intention to understand. And not with just the understanding here, but the understanding of what they truly mean and where they truly at this point in time when they're talking. And so when we're listening to them, one, we're completely understanding them, but we also starting to understand their responses to us. And so we're understanding us as well. And so in the know yourself bit, of course, in seva and in karma yoga, and even in just wanting to give and be present, it's as much about them, right? Listening is definitely about the other person. But for today, I'm going to focus on this know yourself. And in our knowing ourselves, the listening is to get hints or to get insights into those bits that we are blind to ourselves with. And sometimes people will say it in that many words, like, oh, you will never agree to what I say. And then we might respond to, of course I agree all the time. But if they've said it, then that's already something for me to firstly register that they think that way, they have that opinion, and then to introspect if it's true and how it's true and how much it's true. Because nothing's so clear as in black and white, right? If somebody says I'm stubborn, chances are each and every single one of us are stubborn. But to what extent am I stubborn? Because there's going to be a certain amount of acceptableness of stubborn, and then this where you're just going to start becoming difficult to work with other people. So the listening is that first bit of getting clues on what to introspect on when we're listening to other people. But then when we listen to ourselves, which is the second part, and Gurudev does talk about this. Gurudev talks about the listening with other people, and he talks about how listening is to listen to our own thoughts. And this is basically the beginning of meditation, listening to our own thoughts. And the highest meditation is Sakshi Bhav, where we just notice the thought and let it pass. But before we get to the part to Sakshi Bhav, we want this introspective area where we start to understand even why that thought is there. Because sure, thoughts come and go, and ultimately it doesn't matter because we are Brahman. But we're not functioning as Brahman. We're functioning as egocentric personalities. And we want to do sadhana as these personalities and individualities. And we want to do seva, and we want to excel, and we want to evolve as these personalities. And so in terms of the personalities, when the thought comes, to have a understanding seems too small a word. To have to have the full picture, even though I'm seeing one thought. So in my own mind, when there's that one thought, and it could be a simple thought of a desire, there's the full picture of who I am and where that desire fits in. So it could be a fleeting desire of, it's a cold day and I want to be warm. Or it could be one of those desires that just keep replaying and torment me. So, it's something I desperately want, but I feel I can't have. Like if it's a rivalry with someone else, and so I want to outshine them. And so it will be a fleeting thought, but it's not fleeting. It's a strong vasana, and it's causing an underlying emotion that stays in me of jealousy. It could be another thought, and again, it's a desire, but this time it's a desire that inspires me. You know, so it could be that I read something of Puja Gurudev, and then I think, wow, I need to remember that point. And so again, it's a desire, but this is a desire that, you know, fuels my my sadhana. It fuels me energetically to say things and to do things. And so when we have the thought, when we're really listening to our own mind, then we have a bigger picture of our personality and where things fit in. And the reason we need to have this bigger picture is because proportionately, like when I said, how much of, like, how true is it? So I'm stubborn, I'm jealous, I'm angry. It will be true because we all are to some extent. But how much of it is me? I'll only know when I know the big picture, right? So if, you know, if it's like in the big picture, anger is 5%, it comes and goes fairly easily. Nothing to really stress too much about. Be aware of it and let it go. But if anger is something like 65%, okay, I need to pay more attention. I need to really notice those thoughts and be able to substitute them, or to be able to manage them, to be able to transform them, to be able to understand why I'm so irritable and agitated and short-tempered all the time. And see the you know, my impatience to get whatever it is I want. And so that the listening is not just to listen to that thought. It's to listen to with the sense of getting insights with the other people and with ourselves. And I'm running out of time, and I've only focused on one point. So the first point that Gurudev talks here about is this listening. And listening is meditation in itself, because even right now, even though it's a digital satsang, the way we listen is, if we're doing it with complete awareness and attentiveness, then that single pointedness of mind in itself is meditation. And like I said, if we listen with not just our ears, but with our eyes and our heart, then we're integrating our personality in that one act of listening. And even in that integrating of our personality, that's meditation, because meditation is about oneness, and oneness has to start with ourselves, and then it includes everyone else. So listening, whether it be just our own sadhana or whether it be in the world outside with other people, is one of the building blocks of our ability to meditate. And so that's why when we do mindfulness, one of the things is to listen to all the different sounds and to listen to all the different whatever we can in that moment, in that present moment. But like I said, I spent a lot of time on that one topic. And chapter 16 then goes on to talk about integrity. And integrity is this wonderful quality which Gurudev has described quite in an easy to understand way. And integrity is when the personality is united, body, mind, intellect, working as one integrated whole. And so when other people see us, they seeing this united character, which is very clear to understand. Say, you know where you stand with them, and you know that there is a great genuineness about this person. Right? That's when we say somebody has integrity. And so in this togetherness of this person, we know that the most subtle part of our personality is our vasanas, which is our desires, which is our personality, which is our memories, but it's also our intention. And like, why are we doing all the various things we are in the world? And so when our intention is pure, then it will come out in the form of pure thoughts, and then those pure thoughts become speech, which is very pleasant and efficient, and it becomes actions, which is very productive and non-intrusive and harmonious and balanced. And so Gurudev explains that beautifully here in this section of what is integrity. And we can understand what integrity is, and of course we want integrity. And so Gurudev also then explains where and how we fail, right? And so he does this in just that one para in my book. It's in page 61. So chapter 16, chapter 16, the third page, the first para, he breaks it down to us, step 1, step 2, step 3, why we fall in having integrity. And the first one is when we fear something. So our intention is great, right? So let's say we want to be all-inclusive. We want to work together as a team. And so we sit down as a team, and suddenly I get scared that I'm going to be judged, or maybe I'm not good enough to be in this team. And the minute that fear comes in, I withdraw and I don't perform my best, or I hesitate in what I'm doing, and that will immediately hinder my integrity, my availability, my reasoning because the intention might be good, but then by the time it becomes a thought, the fear has sabotaged the way that I am thinking. Then he blocks. Second thing is we have confused. We become confused. So intention is good, but we don't know what exactly it is we have to do, or how that good intention translates into this situation. So when we have lack of clarity and knowledge. And then the third point he mentions is when for a slight moment we get self-absorbed. Actually, we get self-absorbed for more than a slight moment, usually in our lives. But let's say here, this person of integrity. So intention is to be present, to be efficient, to be working harmoniously with other people, and then self-absorbed. Somebody says something, and I think, how dare they speak to me like that? You know, they had no right to say that. I have been here, I have been, whatever the thought is, it turns from outside and it turns to about me and how I'm feeling and what I think about that comment. And then I'm no longer available for outside in that same way, because now all the energy has been sucked to thinking about whatever it is I'm thinking about, which is me. And so the mind becomes small again and petty again. And then we lose our integrity. And the last one is tamas. You know, sometimes we get into this mood of, we know everything, intention is great, but then we just can't be bothered. We just feel it's too much effort, and you know, why should I? And so we lose our inspiration to maintain our integrity. And what's really nice here is that Gurudev has pointed out that it's one thought that changes it from me being this person of integrity and responsibility and efficiency. Just one thought of fear, one thought of pettiness, one thought of confusion, and I lose my integrity. I lose my presence of mind. I lose my vision. And so, because it nicely ties back to that whole thing of listening, right? So, and it's quite an art to be able to do it, because we focus on listening outside, or we sit in meditation and we focus on listening inside. But actually listening in everyday life is to be able to do both. I'm listening to whatever else is going on, but I'm also acutely aware of my own thoughts. And it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice in sadhana to be able to recognize thoughts and to recognize where they fit. Because then when in a meeting, a thought arises and it's petty, and I can see the full picture, and immediately I dismiss that thought because I know it's petty and I know it's going to cause a decline in my attentiveness, and I know it's going to be just unnecessary in the greater scheme of things. So of course we get better with it as practice, but this is the goal. And so then Gurudev ends this chapter 16 with saying, the way to get back our integrity. So this, we know what integrity is. Then we saw that these are the ways we lose it. And now how to solve the problems that make us lose our integrity is this wonderful word of forgiveness. And in the when we ask somebody, generally in society, not in my mission, just generally in the world, if you ask somebody what makes a person spiritual, this is one of the words that they will say. It's somebody who is compassionate, someone who is kind, considerate, someone who is forgiving. And so it's really one of the underlying virtues of spirituality. I mean, there's so many. When we see the Gita, when we see we must, there's so many qualities we need to work on. And if we could just zoom in on the few that are crucially important, one would be cheerfulness, which wouldn't seem like something we have to practice, but it's what Gurudev would want us to practice. And then the other thing would be just the sincerity, because we're not going to get it right all the time. In fact, with all the virtues we have to practice, we're not going to get it right all the time. So just that sincerity to keep trying. And that sincerity has to be regular. And then each one can choose one quality, but eventually at some point, each one of us will have to master forgiveness. And again, forgiveness is twofold. Forgiveness is to the other person who we feel has hurt us. And it can be something as silly as they made a comment in the meeting and we've become bruised by that comment, and so we forgive. Or it could be something far more drastic, like they betrayed us. They stole our money, they cheated on us, and then not needing to forgive the other person. And it's a huge process because forgiveness doesn't happen once. Forgiveness has many layers to it. And so forgiveness is something that has to keep happening. Just like listening, right? Listening doesn't happen once. It has layers. And so we can listen to the same thing as we do in satsang. And every time we listen to it, it has a deeper sense of understanding. With forgiveness too. Very rare do we have to forgive the person once. We'll usually have to repeatedly forgive. But here Gurudev has made note of, and I'm going to focus on this more because I find that in today's world, especially with Chinmaya Mission chicks and Sethukaris, a lot of us are very hard on ourselves, right? We have to be sattvic, and we have to do our sadhana, and we have to, and we become really critical of ourselves. Like, that was a tamasic thought, and I'm too rajasic, and I'm too, and so forgiveness here is to little bit let go of this harshness in the way that we deal with ourselves. And the reason I emphasize this is because the way we deal with ourselves is the way we will deal with other people. And so when we're very harsh with ourselves, we're going to be harsh with other people. And I know Gurudev says that when dealing with yourself, use your head, and when dealing with others, use your heart. And yes, 100%. But the trend or the universal law is, we can't split and be one way with one person and be another way. Well, we can, but in terms of our grain, like we can act one way with one person but who we are doesn't change, right? We can put up facades, but who we are is who we are, and it's going to be who we are with everyone. And so who we are with ourselves is who we are with other people. And so not that we give ourselves excuses, you know, the Gurudev is saying we must evolve, we must be sincere, we must be diligent. But if we should fall, which we will, we 100% will, and if we do fail, then as one of them said in the May 8th celebration, there was one of these beautiful poems about Gurudev that if I fall, I know I fall at your feet. So that even that having that sense of little bit care and comfort and understanding with ourselves, so that forgiving ourselves of our shortcomings, so that we can laugh a bit more, and so that we can enjoy ourselves a bit more, so that we can laugh with others and we can enjoy them. Otherwise, we get too noisy in our head with critical thoughts of ourselves, and then we can't hear the other thoughts, and we lose sight of the big picture. Okay, I'm going to pause there. And these are two very beautiful chapters, and I've just touched on a few points.
Thank you, Swamini Ji. At this point, we would like to open up for questions. So if you do have a question, just send it to me, and then we can go ahead and unmute you so you can ask it to Swamini Ji.
Lots of people leave.
So Tejas has a question. So Tejas will come to you and unmute you. Tejas, go ahead.
Hari Om Swamiji, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. So in chapter 13 in the book, Gurudev said that we must root out all bad qualities ruthlessly. And for many people, we want to inculcate like a sense of discipline, maybe like going for a run every morning or doing japa every morning in our daily lives. So how do we go about doing these while also like forgiving ourselves for maybe not meeting expectations every single day?
So, you know, we must remember that when Gurudev spoke, it was in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and it was a very different cultural mood at that time. In those days, especially in India, right? We're not talking about America. People weren't as hard on themselves. They just kind of did what they had to do. Nobody, it was larger families. It was, you know, bigger problems. Like our problems are, our phones are not charged, and you know we have to. The mood. I'm not making less of our problems, but what I'm trying to say is, when Gurudev said ruthlessly, you know, people weren't ruthless. It wasn't the mood of that period of time where people were ruthless. They kind of just anyways were disciplined. Their level of discipline was so much more, just because even of society and culture and upbringing. And so, you know, if you think about a child in those days, never spoke back to their parents. It was unheard of. So that person who did it once had to ruthlessly get it out of their system. Whereas when he said ruthlessly to us, we're in a different period of time. We're in a period of time where even if Gurudev was here today, I don't know if he'd use that word the way we would use that word. Maybe he would have said diligently rather than ruthlessly, because as a society we have become way more sensitive. We just are. So the kind of words that he would use now would be different to the kind of words he would have used then, just because, you know, the general psyche of the world changes. So I would take the liberty to translate what Gurudev said as diligently work on yourself. And that's the most important thing. If we are doing it consistently, sincerely, that's great. And in our consistent and sincere repeated attempts of working on ourselves, we are both disciplined and, I guess, nurturing. Right? It's that balance that we have to strike with head and heart. So we know what's right, we do what's right, but we don't lose our connection with how we're feeling. And we remind ourselves that if we become too critical with ourselves, we're going to become too critical with other people too. So, does that help? I don't know.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Our next question is from Suraj Patnaik.
Hari Om Swamini Amma. My question was about sincerity. So one of the points that Gurudev had said was that we can overcome hindrances to integrity was to cultivate regular sincerity. And so my question was, what are some small steps that we can take to build that regular sincerity? And then also I was just wondering if we could have a definition of sincerity, because I might be wrong in my understanding of it, but I'm thinking like when we have discipline and we know that we're supposed to be doing a sadhana, so like our mind, like our intellect is telling us, okay, we need to do this every single day. But then the mind might be saying, I don't feel like doing this right now. So in that effort, is sincerity lacking there? So a little bit of a loaded question.
Well, the mind will do that, right? The mind will be more subject to the gunas. Doesn't mean we're insincere. Okay, definition of sincerity is, it's a genuine desire in my heart. So we desire lots of things. I'll give you an example. I think with today's social conditioning, most people who aren't very skinny will desire to be thin just because of social conditionings, right? So if you ask me, do I want to be thin? Yes. Will I work towards it? No. So it's a desire, but it isn't one that motivates me. Yeah. Whereas if you ask me to write a book, then I will stay up all night writing that book, even if it means I know I'm going to be tired the next day. Why? Because desire is what motivates us. And desire will make us or give us the energy to be able to do what it is we need to do. So sincerity is when we have the desire for our own liberation, that it's a genuine desire that's motivating us. It's not a desire that we think we should have. Because a lot of the times we think we should. We should be patient. We should be balanced. We should be disciplined. Whereas when it's a sincere desire, it's not a should. It's not a rule. It's I really want. I really want to be disciplined. I really want to be balanced. So head and heart is always going to have that little bit of a conflict, right? It's the moods, it's the way the equipments are made. But when I really want, even though I drag myself to do it, I'll do it. And so this is the best example I can think of is the mother is exhausted. She's already been up for 2 all nights with the kid crying and the kid howling because the kid's sick. And she just sits down and then she hears the cry again. And it's like, oh. But she'll bring herself up and she'll go to that kid, right? And it's not because I have to or I should. It's because it's just there. The desire to do will just be there. So sincerity is when it's a desire that really does motivate me. And how to cultivate this desire for spirituality is actually we have it. We already have it. But we have to probably remind ourselves, because when the world talks about us, we want to be known as somebody who is sincere, somebody who is affectionate, somebody who is easy to get along with. But we really want that, right? Like if we ever hear that, oh, I don't want that person in my team, me, we'd be horrified. Like, why? Why don't they want me in their team? What's wrong with me? You know, I'm a nice person. So we already genuinely want to be these beautiful people. But like Gurudev said, sometimes we get caught up in fear or in pettiness or in confusion. So, and you know, sincerity isn't, I always do my japa. Sincerity is, I want moksha. And so in this moment, what do I need to do? Right? And each moment will be different. In some moments, it's discipline. In some moments, it's understanding and compassion. In some moments, it's patience. So if I'm very sick and the mind's not alert and I can't do my japa, then in that moment, my sincerity is to remind myself, this too shall pass. I will have a sattvic day again where I can do my japa. Today I'm sleepy. I'm going to sleep. I'm unwell. So sincerity is when I let the honesty of my desire for the higher guide me. I don't know if that made it harder or easier.
That helped a lot. Thanks so much.
Our next question is from Vaibhav Iyer.
Yes.
My question is, earlier you had described that we use our desires to help provide energy for our sadhanas. But if the end goal is to remove desires, what is the best way to attain the energy without having the desire? Or is it okay to have the sincere desire without having an attachment?
So for as long as we are egocentric personalities, we will have desires. It's going to be there. We are fueled by desires. Everything we do is by desires. And so it's in chapter 14, I think, where Krishna says, so lift all your desires from tamas to rajas. That's already great. Already, if we got rid of tamasic desires and we rajasic ones, those are already good. Then from rajas to sattvic rajasic desires, because, you know, if we go too fast from rajas to sattva, we'll fall back into tamas. So sattvic rajasic desires, which mission does great. You know, we'll organize huge projects and then everybody's working towards these huge collective goals, which keeps everyone still working and rajasic, but towards a sattvic end. And then from there, we lift our desires to sattvic desires. And then those are all those desires of doing our sadhana and being in satsang and meditating and increasing our japa. And when the sattva purifies to shuddha sattva, we won't have to let go of the desires. They will fall off on their own. When we are consciously working at getting rid of desires, we will be creating more desires. Because even the desire to get rid of the desire will become the desire, and then you'll get into this endless spiral of. So we just keep doing the best we can, and they fall off on their own. And so in Atma Bodh, the beautiful example is given of there's it's called dirt, but there's a powder that you put in water, the jalam katakarenuvat, and then this powder becomes this slime on top of the water, and then it just sinks and sinks and sinks and sinks and sinks, and it cleans the water as it does. So you added dirt to dirty water, but that dirt cleaned the rest of the water. So we introduce a sattvic thought into our mind, and the sattvic thought will just naturally remove all the other thoughts, and itself also one day fall away. So that's why one of the books in the mission is undoing. It's not so much about doing. It's about sometimes just letting it happen.
Thank you, Swamiji.
But that's higher, huh? That's not everyday spirituality.
Our next question is from Sneha.
Hari Om, my question, how does sincerity correlate with the concept of swadharma?
Yeah, there's no conflict whatsoever, because our dharma is to be happy, our dharma is to be loving, and then our swadharma will be a particular talent that we have. But essentially our dharma is the same, all of us. All of us is Sat Chit Ananda, that's who we are. And so our dharma is sincere. We will genuinely care for other people. We will, by nature, we are wanting happiness and wanting to bring happiness into other people's lives. So it's not swadharma, it's just general dharma, everyone's dharma. And then your swadharma will be a talent which won't conflict with our sincerity of wanting to love. But probably whatever our swadharma is, when we do love, it will beautify our swadharma. And and whatever our swadharma is, we'll find it very easy to be sincere in that. So.
Thank you.
I think Amarji had a question. So Amarji, we are coming to you.
Hari Om, Swaminiji. Could Swaminiji talk about, for those of us who are hard or disciplined, almost overly critical, Swaminiji was talking about how that's not so good for us. Sometimes that is used to also avoid tamas. Could we talk about the difference between distinguishing in ourselves those moments where we are accepting out of tamas and truly accepting? Does that question make sense?
So in tamas, I'd be defensive, right? So let's say if you called me irresponsible, in tamas, I would be like, no, I'm not. In sattva, I would say, yeah, I was. So, and it's not that I am responsible. It's in that situation, yeah, I was. And even as I say, yes, I was, there's already an understanding that it was an incident and it wasn't a truth. Whereas in tamas, when somebody says you were irresponsible, there's the feeling of it being a truth, and therefore I become defensive. So in tamas, even if I'm making excuses for myself not to do sadhana, there'll be a slight flavor of rebelliousness or anger, or a defiance, right? Like, I don't have to, you can't make me. Whereas in sattva, there's a today there's the mood in my mind, which I know is not very conducive. I'm going to do less close eye sadhana, and I'm going to do a little bit more open eye sadhana. There's that ability to not just take it out, but to be able to find something else to do, which is conducive. So the key to know when we are in sattva, sattva finds solutions. So whenever we're in a mood of sattva, we will find solutions. Whereas when we're in a mood of tamas, we just don't want. It's completely desire orientated. So I don't want to do my sadhana. I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to be in this world, or whatever it is that the mood is. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamini.
Okay, our final question is from Ashika. So Ashika, we're coming to you. Ashika, you're unmuted, so if you can ask your question.
I think she's speaking, but just we can't
Can you hear me?
hear very, very softly.
Yes, there you are. Hi.
How do you? So sorry about that. Hear me now?
No worries. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Swamini Ji, it was our first time hearing you speak, so thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful. My question was, in the way that the way we think influences the way we think of others, is that also an antidote to negative self-talk? So, for example, I find it very easy to think nice thoughts about other people, but I find it difficult to not be critical about myself. So if I focus on positive thoughts of others, will that purify my thoughts of myself?
Yeah, it will help. It's inside out approach, outside in approach, right? What we do outside will come back inside. What we do inside will come back outside. So it's twofold. It will help. It will help. But we have to also understand that we buy into a collective psyche. So we have to be aware of what the collective psyche is, and then we consciously choose whether we want to buy into it or not. And in America and in Western world, the collective psyche is, I'm such a loser, I'm horrible, I hate myself, all of this kind of self-dialogue, which is very much prevalent in the collective psyche, not just in young people. It pervades the entire generational span. And so we tend to buy into it, right? What's ever happening in the collective mind, especially when we're not conscious, we will just follow suit unless we've trained ourselves and we make a choice. And we have a choice, but we don't realize we have that choice. So a lot of us just buy into the collective psyche. Everyone hates themselves, so we hate ourselves as well. And, you know, if you don't, then, you know, you're arrogant. Like, how come? Whereas it's not that I'm arrogant. It's just that I'm Brahman, you know. It's not my fault I'm Brahman. Brahman's not going to hate itself. And so it's not even that I love myself. It's that I'm Brahman and there's nothing else. I am love. It's not even I love myself. Whereas in the West, we do so much of that. You know? Whereas in the East, we wouldn't. In the East, it's I am love. I don't have to love myself. I don't have to love other people. I just love whoever's there. If I'm there, I love me. If someone else is there, I love them. So the idea is to stop so much focus on ourselves.
Thank you so much, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamini Ji, for joining us for today's session on Booklight. And I'm sure everyone really benefited from this session. And we hope that when we have Booklight again, Swamini Ji will be able to come and join us for the next series. I'd now like to hand it over to Amarji.
Hari Om. So a couple of quick announcements. One is that we'll have our next session will be a discussion section based off of today's satsang by Swamini Ji. So that'll be next Monday. And then the following Monday, and that discussion section will only be for chicks. So I know that we have non-chicks who have been joining us. So next Monday will be for just chicks. The following Monday will be our next guest, Swami Ji, will be Swami Anukunana Ji from our CIRS in India. He is the resident director of CIRS, and if you haven't met Swami Ji, he is just
very cool.
Yeah, and just so sweet. You just want to just sweet. There's nothing but sweet from Swami Ji. Yeah, and cool. So yeah, if you haven't met Swamiji, please make sure you come. He's just an absolute just joy to be around. So I can't wait for that session. Lastly, the last announcement that I have is for our Balavihar camp. And this camp is obviously with our current situation, COVID-19 and everything, we can't do our in-person camp for Balavihar. So we have all the Swamijis and Brahmacharins of the West have now put together, there's 20 plus of them, a summer camp for all of our Balavihar students in North America. And so please, for all of your for all of your Balavihar classes that you all are teaching, please be sure to encourage your students to go to that. It's going to be a once. I don't think we've ever done anything like this before. So please make sure to encourage all of your students. Please be sure to encourage your little brothers and sisters to join for this camp. It's going to be something really special. And also, if you can do some seva, go do some seva. You know, I know that everyone, so many of our Brahmacharis and the Swamijis can help, could use some help. So for those of you chicks who want to get involved, please reach out. And I'll just say you can direct all your questions to Shubhaniji, and Shubhaniji will field you accordingly. Right, Shubhaniji? With that, I think we'll conclude. And again, thank you so much, Swamini, for joining us. It was what a wonderful situation we're in that we can have you join from across the world, you know?
Yes.
So, now we'll conclude. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.